for this morning, and I hope everyone is doing good as well. Happy 2022. I'm Anthony Arroyo. I will be your host for this morning. And in this call, I'm with Ms. Ruby of Jump Solutions to give you the welcoming remarks. And before we proceed with that, I would just want to say that thank you for attending our webinar. And please get your coffees if you would want, and get some pen and papers also if you would want to take notes. And please feel free to look into our presentation for this morning. So without further ado, I'm transferring the floor for our welcoming remarks to Miss Ruby Estonaptok to give you a quick background on our webinar and for the welcoming introductions for our partner, Jump Solutions. So good morning, Ms. Ruby.
Good morning, Tony. Hello to my Jump Solutions and WSI family. And of course, to our dear valued clients, magandang umaga po. And welcome to our Sophos Cybersecurity Threat Landscape webinar. Again, my name is Ruby Aguilar Estonaptok. I am the product manager from Jump Solutions Inc., handling the network and security solutions. And it is my privilege and pleasure on behalf of Jump Solutions Inc. and WSI to welcome you all here today. Today, we're going to discuss the Sophos cybersecurity threat landscape. The threat landscape is the entirety of potential and identified cyber threats affecting a particular sector, group of users, time period, and so forth. So, according to Sophos 2022 threat report, as we move into 2022, ransomware shows no signs of slowing down. Well, that's no surprise. What we have been in the past 18 months, however, is a shift in tactics. Targets that shifted to ever larger organizations and the business model that dictates how ransomware attacks occur has evolved. It is up to IT professionals to proactively deal with these trends to meet the challenges just on the horizon and beyond. We all know that the effects of the ransomware in every business is devastating and costly. New strains of ransomware keep on innovating and upgrading. It keeps changing its behaviors, and this makes it hard to detect. The internet is now the ubiquitous enabler of work, simpler communication, and even learning. As more and more people and organizations rely on the internet to achieve our day-to-day goals, especially in our current situation, the more we are exposed to cybersecurity risks. And another reason why Sophos is consistently improves upon its tools that eliminate malware while embarking on a journey to create a platform that gives us a real-time visibility into what attackers are doing. All right, hindi ko na po patatagalin pa. Without further ado, I would like to turn over again the floor to our host for today to start our webinar. Tony?
Thank you, Ms. Ruby. So good morning again, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Ms. Ruby. That is quite correct. Ransomware is still prevalent towards all industries across the globe. And I would want to let everyone know that I do hope actually that this webinar is very informative for everyone, just to have at least the sensitivity of what's happening, and also to plan ahead on what can be prevented, what can be done, what would be the remediation steps, especially in building our further businesses moving forward this year. So just a quick side note, I would just want to let us know some quick house rules. All attendees are actually placed on mute. The webinar is actually being recorded. I hope that would be okay with everyone. Questions, please feel free to type it on the chat box. With that, can I just have a quick moment of your time just to test the chat box so that we could see your questions, and also we could see if the chat box is running correctly. Can everyone, or at least the majority, type a test or good morning so that we could know that everything is in order and you could all hear and see us? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. So, okay, I think all is in order. Thank you so much for giving me the privilege of being interactive, ma'ams and sirs. So, lastly, we'll also have a feedback form later. And please hold on over our webinar because primarily we will have some activities or post activities that has some surprises for everyone who's in here in our attend or as our attendees. So kindly hold on. We will have a feedback form later, and we'll also have post activity, which I'll also note later after the actual meat of the presentation. So kindly hold on after the webinar, okay? Or at least until we say our goodbyes this morning. Thank you, everyone. So I am Anthony Arroyo. I'm the product manager here at WSI, handling Sophos, and I will be your host for this morning. So just a quick three slides, a very quick one. I'll just provide an overview of who WSI is. WSI, our company, so that's Wordtext Systems, has been in the industry for about 40 years now. We're actually going to celebrate our 40th year now as IT distributors of partners nationwide, such as Jump Solutions as well. So we handle a lot of different solutions from telecommunications, backup, design, printing and imaging, infrastructure, and of course, cybersecurity, specifically Sophos. We also have our official website, which is www.wordtext.com.ph. Please feel free to check it out. Maybe you would want, or maybe you are looking at other solutions, not just for cybersecurity. Please feel free to check it out and course your requirements towards our partner, Ms. Ruby. Okay, so the agenda for today, as what Ms. Ruby mentioned earlier, is our cybersecurity threat landscape. What do we need to know? What was the actual thing, or what was the statistics that happened last year, and what can we do to help you out moving forward in 2022? Okay, so first things first, ransomware. I'm quite sure everyone is well aware of what ransomware is. So it's the tool that the attackers are using when they are encrypting our data, our sensitive information over our organizations. As what you can see here on the slide, we have here some articles. These ones are just a few articles mid-year last year, wherein ransomware was actually very much prevalent here in the country. And these are local articles. They also mentioned here that the cost for a ransomware that is being attacked towards an organization is an average about 40 million pesos, including all of the compliance penalties that we have to adhere to, also the downtime, also the infrastructure costs, and all the manpower and services that we have to do when we are being attacked by ransomware. So this is not a small thing, and this is across the sectors, locally and of course globally. And these are just some examples. As you can see here, ransomware activity actually surged 10 times since June 2021, primarily because of what the pandemic did, because of the remote work requirements and all of the network infrastructure that we have to adhere or we have to reconfigure, primarily to serve our employees as well as our clients. And these ransomware attacks are still continuing, and the trend is just becoming more and more higher moving forward this post, or actually during and post pandemic. This one is just a slide that shows that the ransomware is also prevalent across the countries. It's just a matter of currency. It's just a matter of industries and the country itself. But ransomware is a global thing that is a very big or a very big headache for all of us that has our organizations in mind. So Sophos, what we did is that we have actually a survey that ran across different countries, including the Philippines, that asked IT decision makers such as yourselves regarding about ransomware and what were the status and what were the other things that they have to be considering of moving forward. And this was done by a third party, so this is without bias, and this has been across the countries as I mentioned. And what we could see here is that since 5 years ago, 2017, 2020, 2021, the good thing or the silver lining is that it's going down. The ransomware as a major threat is somewhat going down, primarily because all of the organizations are actually doing their best to get or to acquire and to be more familiar with cybersecurity solutions. But that's not entirely a safe thing to be okay with. Primarily because ransomware is much more targeted towards organizations from SMB to mid enterprise to large enterprise. This is still a big problem. Why? We'll go on the further. We'll discuss on the further slides. Now, I want to start by sharing actually the key findings, then we'll dive into the details. So as I mentioned earlier in the slide, 37% of respondents of the organizations were hit by ransomware by 2021. So it went down from 2020 primarily because of all the tools that we are acquiring to protect ourselves against ransomware. But within those 37%, 54% were actually hit by ransomware and said that the cyber criminals succeeded in encrypting their data. And within those 54% that was hit by ransomware, 32% of those just actually paid the ransom, which is a very big no-no. I'll show you why, but primarily we naturally we would want to emphasize that paying the ransom is never a good thing, primarily because all of the information is not returned to all of us, to the organizations that were hit by ransomware. And a lot of different factors are actually involved. And we shouldn't have the first priority or at least the first option to pay the ransom. So in terms of the cost, 170K was the average ransom paid across the globe. So that's about 10M. But on our country, it is an average about 40 million already, 40 million PHP. And this is the reason why we don't pay a ransom. Not that is not a good first option. 65% of the encrypted data was restored. So there's still remaining 25% of data, or sorry, 35% of data that is still being held at ransom by the attackers, possibly to do another attack campaign because they succeeded already in targeting that said organization, and or possibly putting it up as a blackmail attempt to gain another campaign towards that said organization and put it on the black web. So that the reason that is why we do not adhere to just pay the ransom is primarily of this. They will not return the complete data that they encrypted. They also do their exfiltration thing. It's not just about encryption now. It's also about exfiltration of data, and they use that as a blackmailing attempt or extortion attempt towards organizations such as ourselves. Now, if we're going to look into the average recovery bill for a ransomware attack, it's about 1.85 M across the board. So that's about 100 million PHP. If we're going to consider the people time, the downtime, the device cost, the network cost, loss of opportunity, ransom paid, and so on and so forth. And this is depending on how big the organization is. But what we would want to put into the table is that there's a big cost if ever we got attacked by a ransomware. And it only needs once. They only need one time to attack us and for them to be profitable and for us to have a big headache. Now, encryption is down, but extortion is up. So 54% of mentioned over the survey that cyber criminals succeeded in encrypting the data. And 7% of those, the data not encrypted, but victim was still held into ransom. Actually, that's the other line of thinking or the other campaign that attackers are doing. It's not just about encrypting the data, but it's about the blackmailing or the extortion attempt that they are doing. And if we're going to look into the previous years, it's actually going up. Previously, in 2020, only 3% mentioned that their data was not encrypted, but they were still being held into ransom. But in 2021, it actually increased. So this is the new campaign that the attackers are doing. It's not just about encrypting the data, but also extorting us because they have the access, they have the visibility of our sensitive data. They will extort us in putting us into ransom if we do not pay. Another one, more victims are actually paying the ransom. So it's actually increasing now. The amount of organizations that just have the first option of just paying the ransom actually increased from the previous years. And this is, again, I hope that this trend goes down this year, this 2022. Now, paying the ransom only gets you part of your data. So 32% actually paid the ransom, right? But what attackers omit to say when issuing ransom demands is that even if we pay, our chances of getting all our data back are actually slim, only 65% in average. So organizations that paid the ransom got back just 65% of their encrypted files, leaving over one third of their data inaccessible. This is according to the survey that was conducted from our the threat landscape. So again, we would want to emphasize that we shouldn't have the first option of just paying the ransom if ever we get on that certain circumstance for our organization. Another one is that recovery cost has more than doubled from 2020 of 0.76 million USD. It's actually now at 1.85 million in 2021. So the recovery cost primarily because of all the sophistications of attacks that this is being doing. There's a lot of segments of our infrastructure, of our IT infrastructure that's being affected. That is why the recovery cost is now getting doubler and doubler moving forward in time. Especially, this is the trend that we could all expect that if we ever get be attacked by a ransomware, the cost to recover from that is just going to be higher and higher moving forward during this pandemic and actually moving forward in a few more years. Now, because of that, and because we now know that in relation to the statistics, we now know that ransomware is still a very big thing across organizations in globally and also in the Philippines. Now, we have to know how does ransomware attacks work? At least on the general sense, we should have an idea of how does a ransomware attack. So one of the earliest forms of ransomware was the infamous yung Samsung threat natin. This was, I think, 2017 or 2015 rather. So Samsung has secured over 6 million USD revenue for cyber criminals since its emergence in late 2015. So targeted at medium to large enterprise, the largest ransom fee paid by one victim, was in excess of 64,000 USD. This was a significantly large amount compared to most ransomware families at that time. While it is now considered to be dead, yung Samsung na technology or Samsung na ransomware, it set the benchmark actually for successful ransomware or what we call an enterprise ransomware. Since then, deadlier copycats are appearing and are demanding higher ransoms than ever. So we have ngayon over, let's say, sa black market, the BitPaymer, a particular deadly strain, is known to have plundered in excess of a staggering 20 million USD from its victims. The results of enterprise ransomware has been very devastating, with in some instance actually, entire cities are being held to ransom. So if ever the ransomware or the attackers or let's say the country-backed attackers. So let's not just name names, but basically we all know who are those attackers that are being backed by countries or state nation-sponsored attackers, are even attacking utility sectors that can cause downtime in terms of putting the entire city or entire cities at ransom. So what has caused the shift towards what we call now the enterprise ransomware? So before, traditional ransomware is very automated. The attacks have become very much predictable. So once you realize that an unexpected email message with a zip file attachment more likely than not contains something bad, you can block all emails with zip file attachments. So if you know attackers are likely to use vulnerabilities to infect machines, you patch those applications. So most mainstream endpoint solutions and firewalls have incorporated these technologies and can now stop these attacks efficiently and effectively. Attackers now have therefore reverted to manual, coordinated, highly targeted approaches, which are far harder to detect and block. Attacks typically focus on a single organization with the aim of infecting as many internal systems as possible, ultimately bringing the victims or organizations down to their knees. Okay. I just have to check if everything is in order. Okay. Okay, I hope everything is in order in terms of technical wise. I hope you can still hear and see me and the slides. Please let us know if there is some technical issues. Please feel free to type it over the chat box. If not, then I'll just proceed. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for that interruption. Okay. So next, what does an enterprise ransomware attack looks like? So a typical enterprise ransomware attack looks like this. First is gaining entry via remote file sharing. So using RTP protocols. The malware such as let's say Emotet or TrickBot and QBot, it goes into an organization, gaining an entry towards that said targeted organization. Next is escalating privileges. That's one of the things that an attacker or a hacker almost always utilize. Once they have an entry point towards our organization, they look into the admin privileges so that they would have further visibility with said organization. It has further access with their configurations and infrastructure. Okay. Okay. Next would be to disable and bypass the security systems that is already existing inside an organization. So they'll look into, let's say, an antivirus, and if it doesn't have anti-tampering, they will disable it so that they will have a further foothold inside an organization and move laterally towards other devices and other network segments as well. Then they will encrypt the files. Of course, that's one of the main action items that they will do: encrypt the files of the organizations and their users, and leave a ransom note. So they will put up at least some ability for the users to leave to communicate with those attackers once they've seen the ransom note, and they will leave the ransom note, and they will put there, let's say for example, as we know, they will mention there that you have to pay on this cryptocurrency wallet so that you could have the decryption files or the decryption key so that you will have access again on your files and on your sensitive data. And what they'll do at the last stage is wait for further contact, because now they are inside the organization. They'll wait for us to respond. Okay, so here's how a typical enterprise ransomware attack is deployed. First is a victim's machine is infected. There's a lot of ways for this to happen, but obviously one of the main vectors of approach is still phishing. So possibly a user or an employee sees a phishing attack, tapos they didn't thought that this was actually a phishing attack, then they clicked it. Then from there, they will have a foothold. Once an attacker gains a foothold on the user's machine, the victim's machine is now compromised with common attack tools, such as, for example, in Cobalt Strike and or PowerShell Empire, so that they could gain further leverage with the servers, attacking the servers, and have further visibility with the other users as well that is connected with those servers inside the organization. The attacker communicates with the victim's machine, usually through a reverse shell. When the attacker's machine initiates a connection to the victim, and the victim's machine listens for incoming connections. The reverse shells aren't necessarily malicious, it's actually legitimate, but they are using it for things like remote server administration. At this point, the attacker now can run ransomware on a victim's machine. But in an enterprise ransomware attack, they are going for a bigger payoff. They use the victim's machine's RDP, which again is a legitimate tool, but can be used maliciously to move laterally across the network, thereby infecting almost, let's say, 90% to 100% of the users that are connected on our organization's infrastructure. Now let's go with know your enemy. Let's give some few examples. So one of the major examples, or is a very prevalent ransomware, is what we call Ryuk ransomware. So Ryuk represents an evolution to the targeted ransomware that's gone before. When it runs, Ryuk drops and executes its payload before covering its tracks by deleting itself. The payload cloaks itself by injecting itself into processes run by NT authority, taking care to avoid yung mga Windows executables or CSRSS.exe, or Explorer.exe, and let's say ISASS.exe. To maximize the damage it can cause, the malware tries to shut down a long list of processes and services, such as those associated with security software, before it begins encrypting files. By excluding particular directories from its encryption, the malware leaves web browsers and basic operating system components untouched. Victims are now left with just enough elbow room to read a ransom note, as I mentioned earlier, buy some cryptocurrency, and pay a ransom, but not much else. So hackers using Ryuk work hard to achieve administrator access because it allows their software to cause so much damage. Enough that many victims have no option but just to pay the ransom note. Okay. Another example is Kaseya. So Kaseya, it is the actual source of outbreak that we've seen was identified within hours to be yung VSA or yung Virtual System Administrator. So it is a remote monitoring and management software package developed by Kaseya. So this one is an authentication bypass vulnerability in the software. It allowed the attackers to compromise the VSA and distribute a malicious payload through hosts managed by the software, amplifying the reach of the attack. So it is a supply chain attack naman. This one is also very deadly if they're going to target, let's say, the supply chain. Thereby, all of their customers and their users will also be affected if the attackers are attacking, let's say, a supply chain or doing a campaign for a supply chain attack. So they asked the Kaseya or the attackers asked $70 million for the universal decryptor. And I believe it was actually paid last July 2021 or July 23 to be exact. Tapos Revel was the one or the campaigners, the attackers, Revel was the one that announced that they were asking for the 70 million for the universal decryptor, and they just vanished from the internet. So ang ating implication there was that it was actually paid yung universal decryptor because this was very deadly, one of the most deadliest strains of a ransomware attack towards all organizations across the country or across the globe actually. Okay, now let's go into best practices. So what can we do if ever, what are the best practices that we could do if ever we would want to, we should want to protect ourselves against ransomware? So first is, it sounds obvious, but this is a surefire way that you'll get the best protection out of an endpoint solution. So it is to turn on all policies and ensure all features are actually enabled. Policies are designed to stop specific threats, and regularly checking they're all turned on will ensure our endpoints are actually protecting our organization, especially against newer strains of ransomware. Furthermore, enabling features that detect fileless attack techniques and ransomware behavior are critical in stopping criminals from infiltrating our endpoints and deploying harmful ransomware strains. So they also enable us to more easily remediate attacks should they somehow get into our environment. Next is, furthermore, actually, enabling features that detect fileless attack techniques and ransomware behavior are critical in stopping criminals from infiltrating our endpoints and deploying yung mga harmful ransomware strains. So as what you could see here on the screen, this is one of our dashboard, which is over the Sophos Central for our endpoint protection, which is Intercept X. And for this, we should always enable all of our policies so that we should always make sure that it's always enabled so that we are always protected against ransomware. Another best practice is regularly review our exclusions. So exclusions, preventing yung mga trustworthy directories and file types from being scanned for malware, are sometimes leveraged ng attackers to soften complaints from users who feel the protection solution is slowing down their systems. Sometimes when we have users and the IT admins don't have any other option but to do further exclusions for the benefit of the users. But attackers are actually leveraging these types of penetration points as well. Over time, a growing list of excluded directories and file types can end up impacting more and more people across the network of our organizations. And malware that manages to make its way into excluded directories perhaps accidentally moved by a user, will likely succeed because it's excluded from being checked. So we always have to regularly review our exclusions. Okay. Another one, enabling MFA within our security console. So multi-factor authentication, or MFA, provides an additional layer of security after the first factor, which is often yung password natin. Enabling MFA across our applications is generally good IT practice, of course. And it's critical to enable it for all users who have access to our security console. So for us, this is our MFA tool, wherein you have to verify your device first if you're going to access the Sophos Central for our endpoint protection. That's also another layer of security so that we would be more protected in terms of misconfigurations and other users that are accessing the IT admin's security components. Another one, ensure every endpoint is, of course, protected and up to date. So checking our devices regularly to know if they're protected and up to date is a quick way to ensure optimum protection. A device not functioning correctly may not be protected and could be vulnerable to a ransomware attack. So our endpoint security tools, like those within Sophos InterceptX, often provide this telemetry. And an IT hygiene maintenance program is also useful for regularly checking for any potential IT issues. Another best practice is maintain IT security operations hygiene. Regular IT security operations hygiene ensures our endpoints and the software installed on them are running at peak capacity or peak efficiency. Not only does it mitigate our cybersecurity risk, but it can save us a lot of time when it comes to remediating potential incidents in the future. So implementing a program to maintain IT hygiene is especially critical for safeguarding against ransomware attacks and other cybersecurity threats. For example, ensuring your RDP, or remote desktop protocol natin, is running only where you need it and expect it. Regularly checking for configuration issues, monitoring device performance, removing unwanted or unneeded programs. These are an IT hygiene check that we have to highlight when we do our IT hygiene program towards our organizations. Next is hunt for active adversaries in our network. In today's threat landscape, malicious actors are more cunning than ever, deploying stealthy techniques to conduct damaging ransomware attacks. Organizations need tools that allow them to ask detailed questions so they can identify advanced threats and active adversaries. Once found, organizations also need tools they can use to quickly take appropriate actions to stop such threats. Basically, we have to be more proactive in looking for threats and also on what's happening with our IT infrastructure. Now, we have to also close the gap with human intervention. Ransomware is not the end game. Ransomware is only the end game for hackers. To deploy ransomware, hackers will have already breached your network and possibly exfiltrated data without our knowledge. Sometimes months yung dwell time nila before an attack even takes place. Technology alone is often not enough to stop these intrusions. The best way to truly safeguard against these types of intrusions is to add human expertise as part of a layered security strategy. So we have on our end a managed detection and response, or specifically our MTR. These are types of services that are very critical. Pairing your IT or your internal IT and security teams with an external team of elite threat hunters and response experts helps provide actionable advice for addressing the root causes of recurring incidents that may happen into our organization. So to sum up the best practices, let's go into general best practices to stay protected from ransomware. Staying secure against ransomware isn't just about having the latest security solutions. So we still need good IT security practices, including regularly training for employees. These are still very essential components of every single setup or every single security setup. Therefore, as well as those endpoint protection specific best practices, the ones earlier on the slides, make sure we're following these 10 general cybersecurity practices. Number one, patch early, patch often. Malware often relies on security bugs in popular applications. So the earlier we patch our endpoints, servers, mobile devices, and applications, the fewer holes there are to be exploited. Next is backup regularly, keep a copy offline. So this one is of course well known into our industry. We always have to have a backup regular or we always have to regularly back up our files, follow the 3-2-1 rule, and keep a copy offline. Enable file extensions. So the default Windows setting is to hide file extensions, meaning we must rely on the file thumbnails to identify them. Enabling extensions make it easier to spot file types that wouldn't commonly be sent to us or to our users, such as JavaScript files. Another one, open JavaScript files in Notepad. So opening a JavaScript file in Notepad blocks it from running any malicious scripts and allows us to examine the file contents. And lastly, or number five, don't enable macros in document attachments received via email. Microsoft deliberately turned off yung mga auto-execution of macros by default many years ago as a security measure. So a lot of infections rely on persuading us to turn it back on. Don't do that. Number six, be cautious about unsolicited attachments. So cyber criminals often rely on an age-old dilemma, which is knowing that you shouldn't open a document until you are sure it's legitimate, but not being able to tell if it's malicious until you open it. So if in doubt, leave it out. Next is monitor administrator rights. Constantly review local and domain admin rights. Know who has them and remove those who don't need them. Another one, or number eight, is keep business apps up to date. So, for example, Office 2016 is now includes control called block macros from running in Office files from the internet, which helps protect against external malicious content without stopping you from using macros internally. So always keep business applications up to date. Second to the last is regulate external network access. So don't leave ports exposed to the world. Lock down organizations' RDP, access, and other remote management protocols. Furthermore, you could also use two-factor authentication to ensure remote users authenticate against VPN. And lastly, of course, the final one is always use strong passwords. It sounds very trivial, but it really isn't. A weak and predictable password can give hackers access to our entire network in a matter of seconds. So always use strong password. Now, all of those discussions that we had, including the ransomware threat landscape and also some best practices, would revolve into how can we help you on your organization's requirements, especially for cybersecurity. Now, on these further slides would be how Sophos can help you on your possible IT requirements. And I do hope this would be a good FYI to everyone. If also if you are considering some other solutions that you currently would want to implement in the near future. This would be an FYI for everyone in relation on how Sophos, how us can help you on moving forward in your IT infrastructure. So let's go first into our endpoint solution, which is our Intercept X. So our Intercept X is our award-winning protection with artificial intelligence and EDR. It provides unmatched protection against malware, against exploits, and of course, against ransomware. So we're very proud to say that we are 12 years consecutively running on the Leaders Quadrant for Gartner. And we're very much proud to be consecutively on the Leaders Quadrant, not unlike our other friendly competitors, which sometimes go into the Leaders Quadrant, but sometimes goes down into Visionary. For us, for the past 12 years, we have been in the Leaders Quadrant for our endpoint protection in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. You could also find us out on Forrester, on other third-party accreditors as well, such as SE Labs, in terms of our credentials and how good we provide the protection for the endpoint security that you require. Now, for our Intercept X, it actually comes into three flavors. So first is our actual protection, which is our Intercept X Advanced. This one will go delve deeper on the succeeding slides on what you could expect on the features of our Intercept X. But we would also want you to let you know that our Intercept X also has the capability to be an Intercept X Advanced with an XDR or Extended Detection and Response component for those requirements that has security analysts or internal security analysts that needs further tools for their threat hunting. And the last flavor is our managed service. So we have our Sophos MTR or Managed Threat and Response. It's a 24 by 7 managed service that would help you augment your internal IT team in doing and conducting further threat hunting for you 24 by 7. So let's discuss these on the succeeding slides. Okay, so for our Intercept X, it's basically a multiple layers of defense. It comes with the foundational, the deep learning, anti-ransomware, and anti-exploit. So for the foundational, it is the known threats. Historically, we've used a combination of signatures and heuristics to look for known threats. This is the traditional endpoint security that we all know, and it works very well for known threats. It is also composed of policies that you would need to be able to control all of your endpoints. So it includes yung threat protection, application control, web control, peripheral control, and of course, data loss prevention policies as well. So that's from our foundational layer. I'll just open my pointer. Okay. But it doesn't stop there. The Intercept X advanced technology doesn't stop on the foundational layer. It also goes into deep learning using AI and machine learning or advanced form of machine learning, which is what we call deep learning, and also goes into a very specific engine, which is the anti-ransomware. We call it the crypto guard. Lastly, it also has a specific engine that looks into exploits. So we have an engine that what we call the anti-exploit engine that looks into exploits or fileless attacks so that we could be protected against the techniques, tactics, and procedures of the bad actors that they are going to utilize. So all of these is our multiple layers of defense that you can found or you could expect on our Intercept X Advance. Now let's go further with the three more or the other three layers of defense a bit further. Let's have an overview of those three more. So again, before I proceed, I would just want to reiterate that all of these technologies are inside in just one Intercept X Advanced license. Okay, for the deep learning AI, the Intercept X actually combines deep learning with best-in-class anti-exploit technology. And we utilize AI and the machine learning to look into the unknown threats naman, the sophisticated malware. And we actually scale effectively using millions of file attributes to analyze the threats and looks into their behavior so that we would know if those are a very sophisticated threat, we would be protected against those sophisticated and signatureless malwares. So we also are very much efficient, under 20 megabytes of a footprint towards the devices, and protects even when the device is offline. And it works out of the box. No training required, actually. The deep learning AI, it works out of the box. It's just a matter of the engine of the Intercept X Advance. Another one is our anti-ransomware. We call it the CryptoGuard and WipeGuard technology. So ransomware protection, which is the CryptoGuard, uses behavior analysis to stop previously unseen ransomware and boot record attacks, never paying a ransom again. So these ones protect our files, and if ever there's a very sophisticated ransomware that goes inside, the CryptoGuard will now kick in the CryptoGuard technology and protect ourselves by doing a just-in-time file caching and automatically rolls back the affected files, thereby defeating the purpose of a ransomware attack. And lastly, the anti-exploit. As I mentioned, we also look into the threats, tactics, and procedures ng mga bad actors so that we do not need to wait for an executable to run. We also look into their procedures. This is mapped into the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is a public documentation and public resource that utilizes exploits and vulnerabilities of applications. So the attackers are looking into the exploits or vulnerabilities to have a foothold into the organization. We look into that, looking into their procedures and techniques, and we could block that from the techniques, tactics, and procedures step pa lang. not waiting for an executable to run inside. Some common exploit examples are credential theft, code caving, yung hiding yung mga malicious code inside legitimate programs, macros, as I've mentioned earlier, for the Excel files, and PowerShell, utilizing PowerShell. And of course, APC injection, yung mga piggybacking to legitimate processes. So these are types of exploits that our engine or anti-exploit engine looks into and protects our organization with. Now, I mentioned earlier, we also have two more flavors of our Intercept X Advance. The second one is the extended detection and response. We'll just provide a quick overview of this. And of course, if you have further technical questions, please feel free to communicate with us so that we could possibly schedule with you a one-on-one session and have a further deep dive with our technical team as well. But for today, let's have an overview of our second flavor, which is what we call the XDR, or extended detection and response. So there are actually three common interpretations of XDR. Sometimes um, they call it cross-layered or cross-product. But for us, it's extended detection and response. And it focuses on the visibility across our IT infrastructure and IT assets, not just the endpoint, but also with the firewalls, with the mobile security, with the cloud security, and server security across the network, so that we would have further visibility and do our threat hunting, especially if we are more proactive in doing that with our organization. So there's a classic saying in InfoSec, prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. So most in the field are familiar with the saying, but it's often later in an organization security maturation that something gets done about it. So eventually, let's say a CISO or a security director or IT leader realizes that preventative controls like endpoint protection and let's say next-gen firewall, while essential, just aren't enough. The question turns from what can we block to what are we missing? So that one is a very important question that the extended detection and response is there to adhere to and to address to the visibility. We need to have the visibility, especially if we are doing the threat hunting, and to know what is happening into our IT infrastructure, especially in relation to cybersecurity posture. Now, threat detection and response challenges today, primarily because different organizations have different or multiple tools from multiple vendors. There are some certain challenges that we are experiencing, like for example, limited integration. So it's very hard to have or to manage different management systems of different vendors, and putting that and integrating it into our day-to-day processes for the IT admins. That also enables or puts into the challenge ng mga missed detections and complex investigations, primarily because it has different methodologies and different management systems. It also puts into the challenge ng complexity in terms of investigating on what's happening, thereby having the conclusion of ineffective incident response if ever we need to do an incident response. For us, the goal of our Intercept X Advanced with XDR is to provide speed and efficiency, unifying the data sets from the endpoint, the mobile, the server, the cloud, and the firewall, extending the visibility for the organization, detecting more threats, and having the ability to investigate deeper on what's happening, thereby reducing the time for detection and response. So previously, if you are familiar with the EDR or endpoint detection and response, it has the scope of endpoint and server. That's the previous technology that we have. But because now we have the extended detection and response, it actually is by default Intercept X Advanced with XDR already, so that you would have the ability to have the visibility for the network layer, the email layer, the mobile, and the cloud. Now we have a unification of the visibility and having the capability to do further threat hunting, and also being more proactive in doing our threat mitigations and responding to threats. So again, if you have further inquiries on the XDR component or even our Intercept X component, please feel free to reach us out. We're more than happy to discuss this with you one-on-one on a separate session. And lastly, on our last flavor for Intercept X, so we also have our managed threat and response. Now, our managed threat and response is from the Sophos experts already. So the Sophos experts would help your IT team for augmentation, especially in looking into threat hunting and doing the actual legwork for threat mitigations as well. So it doesn't stop at notification. They take action, the Sophos experts, and they do it by 24 by 7, threat hunting, detection, and response, delivered by the expert team for you as a fully managed service. So this is also actually the last option if you're looking into the most efficient way for our solution to provide you assistance in relation to cybersecurity posture. We have our Sophos Intercept X Advanced with XDR and MTR. So this one is with the service of the Sophos experts already onboarded for your IT requirements or cybersecurity requirements rather. And for this, so this is the diagram. Primarily, endpoint detection and response tools is from the step 1, 2, and 3. So from the monitoring of threats, machine learning, prioritizing yung mga suspicious activities, and confirmation of malicious activities that can be automatically terminated. All of these are coming from the tools, which is the Intercept X Advanced. Now, if you would want to look further augmentation, you would need human threat hunters and response experts like human analysts investigating yung mga suspicious events, threat hunts and finding new threats, and of course response experts that takes action to neutralize the threats. Then the MTR flavor or the Sophos Intercept X with MTR would be the best option for you. So basically, this is just a visualization that the MTR also has the capability to lock in or to look into the other datasets, not just from our Intercept X endpoint, but also from our firewalls, from our cloud security, and the other sources as well, such as mobile security and email security. Now, to simplify everything, this is the visualization in terms of your choices. So, if you're looking into just the protection, protecting yourselves against ransomware, against exploits, against known and unknown threats, then the Intercept X Advanced would be more than enough for you. But if you would want to have further capabilities, like for example, detection and response, and you would want it to do for yourself or do it yourself, like for example, you have your own cybersecurity analysts, then Intercept X with XDR would be enough for that certain use case. Now, if you would want it to be assisted and you would want the Sophos experts to also be there 24 by 7, then Intercept X with XDR plus MTR would be the best option for your organization. Lastly, we have also our rapid response. Our rapid response is a very good service wherein if ever, knock on wood, we are being attacked at the current moment in time of, let's say, an attacker or a malicious attacker, and they're already doing their malicious attempts towards our organization, you could also call us up in relation to the service that Sophos can provide, which is the rapid response. The Sophos experts from the MTR team would go in and look into what is currently happening, especially if it's happening now. This is an existing attack that is currently being happening now. You could all look into our rapid response. You could look at it as like parang aming emergency response service. We also have that service from Sophos itself. So this is a good FYI. If ever, knock on wood, we get to be attacked by an attacker currently. And that actually ends our webinar for today. But I would just want to put here our promo for this quarter. Actually, we have a promo. If you are tired of threat hunting or you would want further augmentation, we have our MTR promo. And our MTR promo is applicable for users up to 199 users for the Intercept X, and also for the Intercept X per servers for up to 49 users. Again, please, if you have further inquiries on this, please feel free to approach us directly so that we could, so that we could discuss our promo to you separately. But we would want to let you know, ma'ams and sirs, that we have a current promo right now for our Sophos Intercept X with MTR. To conclude, this is our complete ecosystem. the Sophos Adaptive Cybersecurity Ecosystem, or we call it ACE for short. Excuse me. And this is the complete ecosystem from the endpoint to the, excuse me, from the server security, email encryption, and even our firewall. And these are the services that I've mentioned, the MTR and the rapid response. So if you have further inquiries, please feel free to approach us and we will communicate with you as soon as possible. So apologies, ma'ams and sirs. I think I need po ng water. So thank you for your time. I'm putting up the questions, but I'm going to put up a few seconds for the, or at least a few minutes for the questions. But please hold on to your seats po, ma'ams and sirs, because we're going to have a post activity with some surprises. So I'm just going to activity, which is yung ating feedback form. Now, again po, I encourage everyone to write in your feedback forms. That truly helps us. And we'll also get 3 winners over a Wheel of Fortune type doon sa ating feedback form. So yung 3 winners natin will also get 500 pesos each. Based doon po sa mga nag-submit ng feedback form. Yun po yung ticket nyo. So ito po yung feedback form QR code. Please feel free to scan it or maybe look into din po sa ating chat box. Meron din po tayo doon link para hindi po tayo mahirapan. Just click on the link and we'll just give a few more minutes para po makapag-submit po lahat ng feedback form. Then we'll do our Wheel of Fortune. We'll get 3 winners from there. And good luck po dun sa ating tatlo. We'll also receive 500 pesos each over GCash. Thank you, everyone. Let's say our proper goodbyes after this na lang po siguro. We'll give a few more minutes for everyone to submit their feedback. Thank you, everyone. I'll get back to you after this. A few more minutes. Especially if you would want to discuss further our cybersecurity solution. My name is Anthony Arroyo. I thank you so much for your time. And I'm just going to give the floor to Ms. Ruby for her final um, um, conclusion. And thank you so much, everyone. Ms. Ruby?
Thank you, Tony, for the very informative and insightful presentation for today. And of course, congratulations po to all our winners. Once again, I would like to thank you all for being here with us today and taking the time to listen to what we have to say and present. For any additional inquiries like what Tony mentioned earlier, please don't feel free to reach out to your contact account managers from Jump Solutions Inc. Again, on behalf of Jump Solutions Inc., WSI and Sophos team, thank you very much and have a great day. Ingat po.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.